Experts are analyzing what they call the handbag of the gods. This archaeological breakthrough confirms a civilization hidden for 8,000 years.
Imagine ancient gods frozen in stone, each holding a tiny, mysterious bag in their hands. At first glance, it looks like an ancient purse, but scholars and historians are still scratching their heads, trying to figure out what it really is. Could it be a sacred ritual tool, a symbol of cosmic power, or even some lost technology? Whatever it is, the handbag of the gods is one of Mesopotamia's strangest, most puzzling wonders, and it's about to get a closer look. This is way more than that typical Gucci bag. The handbag of gods. If you've ever seen an ancient Mesopotamian relief, you might have noticed something oddly familiar. A god or divine figure holding what looks like a tiny bag or purse. At first, it almost makes you do a double take. Wait, did a Sumerian god just grab a designer tote? Of course, it wasn't a Louis Vuitton, but the resemblance is uncanny, and that's exactly why people have been fascinated by it for decades. Scholars call it the handbag of the gods, a term that sparks curiosity, debate, and, let's be honest, a little bit of imagination. These handbags appear in carvings and bas-reliefs from ancient Mesopotamia, mainly in Assyrian and Sumerian art. The figures holding them are rarely just anyone. We're talking about gods, semi-divine beings, or kings under divine influence. Often the handbag is paired with another mysterious object, like a pine cone, flower-like symbols, or a rod and ring. It's clear these weren't just decorative doodads. These carvings were loaded with meaning, even if we haven't fully cracked it. What's fascinating is how consistent the symbol is, not just across Mesopotamia, but across space and time. Similar bag-like objects pop up in other ancient cultures. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Mesoamerica, India, and even parts of Southeast Asia. You could almost start a game of Spot the Ancient Handbag and find it in locations separated by thousands of miles and centuries. This has led some people to speculate that the handbag motif represents some universal symbol, though mainstream scholars remain cautious about jumping to global conspiracy theories. Still, it's hard to deny the intrigue when you see the same shape cropping up in places that seemingly had no contact with each other. The bags themselves are small, often held in one hand, dangling at the wrist or palm. Some reliefs suggest they were portable, while others make them look more like ceremonial tools attached to the figure by a strap. Ancient scribes and artists clearly thought this object was important enough to carve in stone, so whatever it symbolized, it mattered a lot. Think of it like seeing someone hold a briefcase today. You immediately assume it contains something significant. Documents, money, maybe a secret plan. That's probably the kind of impression ancient people were meant to get, too. Interestingly, the handbag doesn't stand alone. In many carvings, it's paired with other symbolic objects, like the pine cone, which scholars often interpret as a tool for ritual purification or life-giving symbolism. The rod and ring motif sometimes appears alongside it, and that object has been interpreted as a measuring tool for land, power, or divine authority. This combination of symbols hints at a broader narrative. The handbag isn't random. It likely had a very specific purpose in the spiritual and cultural imagination of Mesopotamians, even if the exact purpose is lost to history. Some theorists argue that the handbag represents a portable weight or measurement device, connecting it to trade, tribute, or religious obligations. Others suggest it's a ritual bucket, carrying holy water or sacred substances during ceremonies. Then there are the fringe ideas, less academically supported, but certainly fun to imagine, that these are containers of secret knowledge, divine energy, or even ancient technology beyond our comprehension. Whether you lean toward the practical or the fantastical, it's hard not to be captivated by the mystery. Part of what makes the handbag so compelling is its ambiguity. Unlike a clearly defined object like a crown or a staff, this little bag resists interpretation. ancient artists didn't leave notes explaining it, and no archaeological dig has turned up a physical counterpart that clearly shows its contents or exact function. That's why debates rage on, mixing scholarly reasoning with popular fascination. You get everything from historians trying to decode symbolic meaning to YouTube theorists claiming the gods were carrying alien tech in the first handbag ever seen. Well, the handbag of the gods is a reminder that even in the oldest civilizations, some things were meant to intrigue, confuse, and inspire wonder. It's a small object in a big, complex world, but its presence in countless carvings tells us that it held importance, whether literal, symbolic, or both. So, next time you look at a Mesopotamian relief, pause for a second and imagine that tiny bag might be holding something humanity still doesn't fully understand. And that's exactly why it keeps us coming back for more. We've seen what the handbag of the gods looks like, and why it captured the attention of ancient artists. What, if anything, was actually inside these mysterious little bags? That's where the real intrigue begins. What's inside it? We've stared at countless Mesopotamian carvings and seen gods clutching what looks suspiciously like tiny handbags. The big question that immediately jumps to mind is, what on earth were they carrying? Were these ancient deities the original hoarders, stuffing their little bags with sacred secrets, mystical dust, or maybe just divine snacks? As tempting as that mental image is, scholars and enthusiasts alike have tried to piece together the possibilities, and the results are a mix of the mundane, the symbolic, and the downright bizarre. Let's start with the most straightforward idea. The handbag might have held something practical. Some researchers suggest it was essentially a portable weight or measurement tool. In ancient Mesopotamia, trade, taxation, and tribute were critical parts of daily life. A small, standardized weight could symbolize authority or responsibility, a reminder that the gods or the kings acting in their name were keeping track of society's balances. In this scenario, the contents weren't hidden treasure, but a symbolic unit of accountability. In other words, the handbag may have carried the weight of the law, literally and figuratively. Then there's the ritual perspective, which is a little more mystical but still grounded in cultural context. Some scholars believe that these bags were actually small ritual buckets. In ancient ceremonies, holy water, sacred oils, or other symbolic substances could have been contained inside. Imagine a priest or god using the handbag to sprinkle purification water, bless a city, or anoint a king. That would explain why the object is often paired with other ceremonial symbols, like pine cones, rods, or floral motifs. The handbag, in this interpretation, becomes less of a bag and more of a spiritual tool, holding intangible power in a tangible container. Of course, the internet and fringe theorists have other ideas, more entertaining ones. Some speculate that the handbag contained ancient knowledge, secret codes, or even some kind of advanced technology lost to the sands of time. There's no hard evidence for any of this, but it's a compelling mental picture: a tiny bag, ancient gods, and a mysterious device that predates humanity's understanding. Others have suggested it might have carried seeds, pollen, or magical powders, tying into creation myths, fertility, or life-giving symbolism. While it's tempting to lean into the sci-fi angle, these ideas mostly exist in the realm of speculation. Still, they highlight just how magnetic this little bag is to human imagination. Interestingly, the inside of the handbag might also have been purely metaphorical. In some interpretations, the bag doesn't actually hold physical items at all. Instead, it represents the concept of carrying something important: power, responsibility, or divine authority. Kind of like the modern phrase, carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, except, in this case, the weight fits neatly into a little divine tote. The gods might have been holding abstract concepts, visually encoded in stone for humans to admire, study, or perhaps even fear. Different cultures and time periods have their own theories about the bag's contents. In Göbekli Tepe, similar bag-like objects appear in carvings that predate Mesopotamia by thousands of years. Some suggest these could represent containers for ritual substances, while others argue they may have been symbolic props in storytelling or myth-making. Even in distant Mesoamerica, depictions of gods with tiny pouches or buckets appear, hinting at some kind of recurring human fascination with small, portable containers of power. Across these cultures, one thing is clear: the handbag wasn't just decoration. It was important, even if no one knows exactly why. Humorously, the mystery fuels endless speculation. Wouldn't it be wild if the contents were something we'd instantly recognize today, like a smartphone or a USB drive? Obviously, that's not historically accurate, but it captures why these objects continue to grab our attention. People love a tangible mystery. They want to peer inside, see the secrets, and imagine possibilities that stretch from the practical to the fantastical. At the end of the day, the handbag's contents remain one of history's most enduring riddles. It might have been a small weight, a sacred liquid, seeds, pollen, or just a symbolic placeholder for divine responsibility. We may never know, and that's part of its charm. The handbag continues to tantalize both scholars and casual observers, reminding us that even tiny objects can hold enormous intrigue, whether real, symbolic, or imagined. Let's step away from imagination and fringe theories for a moment and see what the academic perspective tells us about this enigmatic object. The radical interpretation. We've imagined what could be inside the handbag of the gods, from ritual holy water to cosmic secrets. But now it's time to put on our serious scholar hats for a moment. Mainstream historians and archaeologists have been studying Mesopotamian art for decades, and while they may not have all the answers, they provide some of the most grounded explanations for what these mysterious little bags really represent. Spoiler alert, it's less about hidden treasures and more about symbolism, authority, and ritual. One of the most widely accepted interpretations ties the handbag to symbols of measurement and authority. In Mesopotamian art, small objects often represent larger concepts like the control of land, trade, or social order. Some scholars suggest that the handbag was a portable weight, representing accountability and responsibility. It wasn't meant to be carried around for practical use, but symbolized that the gods or the kings under their guidance were in charge of keeping balance in society. In other words, the handbag becomes a visual shorthand for "I am responsible for maintaining order," a concept that probably resonated strongly with the ancient audience. Another prominent academic explanation links the handbag to ritual purification practices. In Akkadian texts, there's a reference to a small bucket called bandudu, which was used in sacred ceremonies. The handbag could very well be this ceremonial bucket used to carry holy water, oils, or other substances during rituals. When you pair this idea with the frequent depiction of pine cones or other symbolic tools in the same hand, it makes sense that the gods were engaged in ceremonial acts of cleansing or blessing. The handbag, therefore, isn't an everyday accessory. It's a functional piece of sacred imagery. Scholars also consider the contextual placement of the handbag in reliefs. Typically, it appears alongside figures of authority, kings, high priests, or deities themselves, and is often part of a larger tableau that includes other symbolic objects, like rods and rings. The rod and ring motif is particularly interesting. Archaeologists often interpret the rod as a measuring stick and the ring as a coil of measuring string, both symbols of order, land measurement, and governance. When the handbag shows up near these objects, it reinforces the idea that the bag is another symbol of authority and control, not just a random prop. Essentially, the handbag fits into a visual language that communicates power, responsibility, and divine sanction. It's important to note that mainstream scholarship tends to push back against sensational interpretations. While fringe theorists might suggest the handbag was some form of alien technology or a container of magical energy, academic research focuses on what evidence actually supports. Carvings, texts, and archaeological context point towards symbolic and ritualistic functions. This doesn't make the handbag any less fascinating. In fact, its power as a symbol might be exactly why it appears in so many different artworks across centuries. There's also a subtle point that scholars emphasize. The handbag is not necessarily meant to be understood literally. Ancient Mesopotamian art often used small, portable objects as metaphors. The handbag could represent abstract concepts like divine protection, social responsibility, or the spiritual weight of leadership. By holding the bag, a god or king visually communicates these ideas to viewers.
This symbol appears in works from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, Asia and Africa, Europe and North America.
It's like ancient infographic storytelling. One image conveys multiple layers of meaning without a single word. Some academic interpretations even extend the handbag's significance into cosmic symbolism. In certain Sumerian myths, objects associated with gods carry broader meanings related to life, fertility, and the universe. While this interpretation is less concrete than the weight or ritual bucket theories, it underscores that the handbag may operate on both a practical and a symbolic level, bridging the human and divine worlds. The beauty of the scholarly approach is that it grounds speculation in evidence, while still respecting the handbag's mystery. Archaeologists can point to patterns, comparisons across artifacts, and textual references to suggest likely explanations. Yet even they acknowledge that some elements, like the exact function, original materials, or daily use, remain unknown. That uncertainty doesn't diminish the handbag. If anything, it makes it even more captivating. In short, mainstream scholars see the handbag of the gods not as a literal container of secrets, but as a symbolic tool of authority, ritual, and divine oversight. It is a visual shorthand for responsibility, power, and sacred action. The gods weren't just holding bags, they were holding ideas, communicating societal order and spiritual significance in ways that were immediately understandable to the people of their time. And while we might never know every detail, understanding the handbag through this lens provides a solid, evidence-based framework for appreciating its role in Mesopotamian culture. To really understand these ancient people, we need to step into their cities, homes, and fields to see how they lived, worked, and created a culture that still fascinates us today. Also, why a handbag was used and invented in this ancient time. Step into Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization, was home to some of the earliest cities in human history. Located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, this fertile land allowed humans to settle, farm, and build complex societies. Life here was closely tied to the rhythms of nature. The rivers flooded predictably, providing rich soil for crops, but also bringing the occasional destructive flood. For the Mesopotamians, survival depended on careful planning, innovation, and cooperation, laying the foundations for agriculture, trade, and urban living. Farming was the backbone of daily life. Wheat, barley, and dates were staples, while livestock like sheep, goats, and cattle provided meat, milk, and wool. Irrigation systems were crucial. Canals and dikes helped channel river water to fields, showcasing the ingenuity of Mesopotamian engineers. The surplus from farming didn't just feed families, it fueled trade and allowed cities to flourish. Markets became hubs of activity, where farmers, craftsmen, and traders exchanged goods, ideas, and culture. These bustling centers gave rise to early economic systems and the first recorded use of currency and weights. City life was vibrant and structured. Mesopotamian cities like Ur, Uruk, and Babylon were built around ziggurats, massive temple complexes that served both religious and administrative purposes. Religion was deeply woven into everyday life. The Mesopotamians worshipped a pantheon of gods, each controlling aspects of nature, society, and human destiny. People believed that pleasing the gods was essential for survival, so rituals, offerings, and festivals were common. Temples were not only spiritual centers, but also economic hubs, managing lands, collecting taxes, and storing surplus goods. Social hierarchy was clearly defined. Kings and priests held the most power, overseeing governance, law, and religious practice. Merchants and skilled artisans formed the middle class, while farmers and laborers made up the majority of the population. Despite these divisions, families were central to social organization. Households were often multi-generational, with shared responsibilities for cooking, farming, and childcare. Education, primarily for boys, focused on reading, writing, and religious instruction. Scribes played a crucial role, keeping records on clay tablets with cuneiform writing, a system that revolutionized communication and administration. Culture in Mesopotamia was rich and multifaceted. Music, dance, and storytelling were common forms of entertainment, and literature thrived with epic tales like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which explored themes of friendship, mortality, and the quest for immortality. Artisans excelled in pottery, sculpture, and metalwork, often creating objects that blended functionality with symbolism. Even daily objects like bowls or jewelry were carefully crafted and decorated, reflecting aesthetic values alongside practical needs. Trade extended Mesopotamian influence far beyond the rivers. They traded grain, textiles, and crafted goods for timber, stone, and metals from neighboring regions, creating early networks of cultural exchange. This connectivity not only enriched material life, but also facilitated the spread of ideas, technology, and religious practices across the ancient Near East. Life in Mesopotamia was a balancing act between humans, nature, and the divine. Their culture emphasized ingenuity, community, and reverence for the forces that shaped their world. From agricultural innovations to monumental architecture, intricate social systems, and enduring literature, Mesopotamians laid the groundwork for civilizations to come. Their legacy reminds us that complex societies arise not just from resources and geography, but from the creativity, cooperation, and curiosity of people striving to understand and shape their world. And that handbag? See how those people were busy and kind of progressive? Perhaps they actually need one like we need one. If your mind was blown with the handbag of gods, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more fascinating stories from history, archaeology, and ancient mysteries.